ceilings so high they swallowed sound, long corridors where footsteps died before reaching the end. Guards stood at precise distances from one another, dressed in black, faces unreadable, hands never far from their weapons. Even the air felt controlled, as if the mansion itself knew who ruled it and refused to breathe without permission. Everyone in the city knew his name. They spoke it quietly, with respect or fear, sometimes both. He was a man who did not raise his voice and did not need to. Decisions made in his study changed lives far beyond the iron gates of his estate. He ruled through distance, through silence, through the understanding that if he noticed you, it was already too late. Inside his home, that distance grew sharper. Hidden in the corners of the mansion were cameras, small, perfectly placed. Near the ceilings, behind carved moldings, tucked into shadowed edges where no guest ever thought to look. They watched the hallways, the staircases, the entrances, and most of all, they watched one room on the second floor. His daughter's room. He told himself the cameras were for security, for safety, for protection. A man like him had enemies everywhere, and a sick child was a weakness the world would gladly exploit. That was the excuse he repeated to his men, to his advisors, to himself. But at night, when the house fell silent and the guards shifted into their slower patrols, he sat alone in his study with the lights dimmed low and the monitors glowing softly in front of him. He did not watch the gates or the perimeter. He watched his daughter breathe. She was small for her age, thinner than she should have been, her skin too pale against the white sheets. Machines hummed beside her bed, blinking lights measuring things he did not fully understand but feared anyway. She rarely spoke. When she did, it was in whispers so faint they barely registered on the audio feed. Most nights, she stared at the ceiling, unmoving, as if stillness might keep the pain from finding her. He could not sit beside her bed. He had tried once, only once. He had stood in the doorway, watching her chest rise and fall, his hands clenched so tightly his fingers hurt. The smell of medicine and antiseptic filled the room, pressing into his lungs. He had taken one step forward, then another, and suddenly the weight of it all had crushed him. The thought that he could not protect her, that his power meant nothing against sickness, that if she died, no amount of blood or money or control could bring her back. He had turned away before she saw him. Since then, he watched from behind glass and screens, calling it vigilance, knowing deep down it was fear, knowing it was cowardice. The staff learned quickly not to mention it. Nurses came and went. Specialists spoke in careful tones. No one stayed longer than necessary in that room. Even the guards avoided the hallway, as if illness itself were contagious. Then the maid arrived. She was hired for cleaning only. No medical duties. No interaction required, just floors, surfaces, laundry, quiet work that kept her invisible. That was the intention. She was younger than most of the staff, dressed simply, her movements careful and unassuming. She did not speak unless spoken to. She did her work with steady hands and downcast eyes, never lingering where she was not told to be. On her first day, she passed through the second-floor hallway with a cart of cleaning supplies. As she reached the corner near the child's room, she slowed. Not enough for anyone else to notice, just enough to look. Her eyes lifted, scanning the ceiling. She saw the camera. Then another, barely visible above the doorframe, and another near the window, hidden behind decorative trim. Her hands did not shake, her face did not change. She did not look surprised. She simply nodded to herself and continued pushing the cart. Downstairs in the study, the mafia boss noticed something small but unsettling. On one of the monitors, the maid had paused, only for a second, but she had looked directly at the corner where the camera was hidden. Most people never did. He leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. The maid resumed her work, wiping surfaces, emptying bins, never once glancing back at the lens. She did not ask questions, did not complain, did not avoid the hallway like the others. Later that evening, she cleaned the room while the child slept. She moved quietly, careful not to disturb her. At one point, she stopped near the bed and adjusted a blanket that had slipped. The child stirred, her brow tightening, but did not wake. The maid hesitated, then did something unexpected. She whispered, Not loudly, not enough to wake the girl. Just a few soft words meant more for comfort than conversation. A promise that the night would pass, that morning would come, that someone was there. The camera caught it all. The mafia boss sat frozen, watching from his chair. His chest tightened, a familiar mix of anger and shame rising in his throat. The maid was doing what he could not, standing close, being present. And she had not once reacted to the fact that she was being watched. That was what unsettled him most. Everyone else feared the cameras, hated them, pretended they weren't there. The maid had seen them and accepted them, as if she had lived under watch before. The maid learned the rhythm of the house, faster than anyone expected. She learned when the guards shifted their weight and when they relaxed. She learned which doors were never used and which ones were watched more closely. She learned that silence in this house was not peace, but tension held in place. She cleaned during the hours when the mansion felt most empty. Early morning and late evening when footsteps echoed too loudly and every sound felt exposed. Most of the staff rushed through their tasks, eager to leave the second floor as quickly as possible. The maid did the opposite. She lingered. Not in obvious ways. Not enough to be accused of curiosity or defiance. Just long enough to finish one task properly before moving to the next. Just long enough to notice things others avoided seeing. She noticed how the child never slept deeply. How her fingers curled into the sheets, as if bracing for pain even in dreams. How the machines beside the bed seemed louder at night when the world outside went quiet. And how no adult voice ever stayed in the room longer than necessary. The maid spoke while she worked. Not to demand attention. Not to force a response. She spoke as if the child were already listening. She described the day outside the window. The sound of birds in the garden. The way the light changed across the marble floors in the afternoon. Simple things that did not ask for answers. The child did not speak. She barely moved. But one afternoon, as the maid wiped dust from the bookshelf, she noticed something small. The child's eyes followed her. Just slightly. Not enough for anyone else to notice. But enough for the maid to stop moving for a moment. Enough to tell her she was not alone in the room. Downstairs, the mafia boss saw it happen on the monitor. He replayed the footage twice, then a third time. The way his daughter's gaze shifted. The way her attention stayed on the maid, even after she turned away. Something twisted in his chest. Hope felt dangerous. He had lived long enough to know that hope always demanded payment. That night the child cried. Not loudly. No screaming, no alarms. Just a soft, broken sound that barely carried past the door. The nurse hesitated in the hallway. She checked the chart, glanced at the clock, and sighed. Another long night, she murmured before turning away to fetch medication. The maid heard the sound before anyone else. She froze with a cloth in her hand. Every instinct told her to stop. This was not her role. She was not paid for this. She was not supposed to cross that line. But the crying continued. Thin and fragile. The kind of sound that came from exhaustion, not tantrum. The maid pushed the cart aside and stepped into the room. The child was shaking. Her face damp with tears, her breathing uneven. The maid moved without thinking. She knelt beside the bed and brushed damp curls from the child's forehead. "It is all right," she whispered. "You are not alone." The words were simple. But the child reacted as if something inside her had cracked open. Her hand reached out, blindly, fingers curling into the fabric of the maid's sleeve. In the study, the mafia boss stood so abruptly, his chair fell backward. His heart pounded so hard, he could hear it in his ears. On the screen, his daughter clung to the maid like a lifeline. The maid did not pull away. She sat on the edge of the bed, holding the child steady. She rocked her gently, humming under her breath. A melody old and soft. One that did not belong in this cold, guarded house. The child slowly calmed. Her breathing evened. Her grip loosened, but did not let go. The maid stayed. She stayed long after the crying stopped, long after the child fell into exhausted sleep. She stayed until the nurse returned and stared in quiet shock. "You should not be here," the nurse whispered. The maid only nodded and stood, as if she had always known she would be seen eventually. Downstairs, the mafia boss covered his face with his hands. Shame burned hot behind his eyes. The maid had crossed a boundary he was too afraid to approach. And she had done it without fear of the cameras, without hesitation, without asking permission. That was when the question settled into his mind, heavy and unavoidable. Why did the maid not fear being watched? And why did his daughter reach for her instead of him? The night changed everything. It began quietly, the way disasters often do. No alarms, no raised voices, just a subtle shift in the air that the house itself seemed to sense. The maid was finishing the last corridor on the second floor. Her cart rolled softly across the marble. She had learned how to move without sound, how to exist without drawing attention. From behind the closed door of the child's room came a sound she had not heard before. Not crying, not whimpering. A strained, uneven breath that scraped against the silence. She stopped. Every rule told her to continue walking. Every warning she had been given echoed in her mind. This was not her responsibility. This was not her place. Inside the study 3 floors below, the mafia boss leaned closer to the monitors. He saw his daughter twist beneath the blankets, saw her face tighten in pain, saw her small chest struggle to draw air. He reached for the intercom, then stopped. Fear froze him in place. The same fear that had kept him out of that room for months. Upstairs, the maid did not wait for permission. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The child's eyes were open now, wide, unfocused, filled with panic. Her body trembled as if fighting something invisible. The maid moved quickly. She set her cart aside and knelt beside the bed. Her voice was calm but firm. "Look at me. I am here." The child did not speak, but her gaze locked onto the maid's face, as if anchoring herself to the only solid thing in the room. The maid pulled a basin closer, just in time. The sickness came hard and sudden. She held the child's steady, brushing hair away from her face, whispering reassurance between breaths. "It will pass. Breathe with me." Slowly. On the screen, the mafia boss watched his daughter cling to a stranger. Watched a woman he barely knew take control of a moment that terrified him. His hands shook. His mouth went dry. He wanted to storm into the room, to prove he was still a father, not just a shadow. But he did not move. The maid cleaned the child gently, changed the sheets with practiced efficiency. Her movements were sure not rushed, as if she had done this before many times. When the child collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted and shaking, the maid did something no one else ever had. She stayed. She sat on the edge of the bed and took the child's hand. Her thumb brushed slow circles into small, cold fingers. Her voice lowered into a hum. The melody was unfamiliar, yet deeply comforting. Soft and old. It wrapped around the room like a promise. The child's breathing slowly evened. Her grip loosened, but did not release. Her eyes fluttered, then closed. In the study, the mafia boss felt something inside him crack. Tears blurred the monitors. He did not wipe them away. He had ordered violence without hesitation. He had ended lives with a nod. But watching someone else comfort his child while he hid behind cameras shattered him. The nurse arrived late. Too late. She stopped in the doorway and stared. The child was sleeping, peacefully, her hand still wrapped in the maid's sleeve. The maid rose quietly, stepped back as if she were the one intruding. She did not explain, did not apologize. She simply bowed her head and left the room. Downstairs, the mafia boss sat in the dark long after the screens went still. That night, he understood something he had been refusing to face. Protection without presence was not protection at all. And the woman who crossed the line he feared did not fear it at all. The song returned the following night. Not as a hum this time. Not as background comfort meant to fade into sleep. But as something deliberate. Something remembered. The maid stood near the window of the child's room, folding fresh linens. The night outside pressed against the glass dark and watchful. The machines beside the bed blinked, softly marking time in a language only doctors understood. The child lay awake. Eyes open. Silent. The maid sensed it before seeing it. That familiar awareness that came from years of surviving by noticing small changes. She turned slowly and met the child's gaze. "You are awake," she said softly. The child did not answer. But she did not look away either. The maid hesitated. Then began to sing. Not loudly. Not with confidence. But carefully as if testing the air. It was not a song anyone in the house should have known. Not a lullaby passed through radios or schools. It was old. Regional. Carried in the bones of a place far from this cold estate. Downstairs the mafia boss stiffened. The sound came through the monitor like a blade to the chest. Every note struck memory. Every word carried a voice he had buried with his wife. He stood so fast, his chair scraped violently across the floor. "No," he whispered. "That is not possible. The melody belonged to nights long gone. To a woman who used to sit on the edge of their bed, singing to newborn daughter under low lamp. To a dialect even his men did not speak. On the screen his daughter's lips moved. Not speaking. Not forming sound. But shaping the words. His breath caught painfully. He pressed closer to the monitor, as if proximity could pull him through the glass. The maid continued singing. Unaware, or pretending not to be aware of the cameras. Her voice steady now. "Sure." When the song ended, she crossed the room and did something that made the mafia boss grip the edge of the desk. She traced a small sign on the child's forehead. A blessing gesture. One his wife had learned as a girl. One practiced only in a narrow part of the city she came from. The child relaxed visibly. Her shoulders softened. Her breathing slowed. The maid tucked the blanket around her carefully. Then whispered words meant only for the child. "You are watched over, even when you cannot see them." The mafia boss turned away from the monitors. His chest tight. His thoughts spinning violently. How did she know? How did a cleaning maid know the song? The gesture. The words his wife used when fear crept into the night. By morning, the house was on edge. Orders were given quietly. Background checks requested. Files pulled. Names searched. The maid noticed immediately. The guards watched her more closely. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. Vincent, the house manager, observed her with new interest. She did not react. She scrubbed floors, folded linens, moved through the mansion as she always had. But that night, the mafia boss confronted her indirectly. He appeared in the hallway as she pushed her cart past, pretending to read something on his phone. "You speak Italian," he said casually. She inclined her head. "Yes." "Which region?" "Naples," she replied without hesitation. His jaw tightened. "Specific." She met his gaze for the first time. Calm. Unflinching. "I lived there for many years." He nodded slowly. Said nothing more. But when he returned to his study, his hands shook. Because coincidence no longer felt convincing. And the cameras he once trusted now showed him something far more dangerous than enemies. They showed him a woman who knew his past, who reached his daughter, and who did not fear being watched at all. The cameras no longer felt like protection. They felt like witnesses. The mafia boss watched more than ever now. But not for threats. Not for intruders. He watched for the maid. He watched how she entered the room without hesitation. How she spoke to his daughter as if silence were not absence but space. How she waited instead of filling the air with questions. How she treated the child like someone whole, not fragile. His daughter changed in ways the doctors could not explain. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But enough to frighten him with hope. She began to sit up longer. She ate small portions without being coaxed. She no longer stared through people. She watched them. And when the maid spoke, she listened. One evening, the mafia boss heard something that made his breath stop. Papa. The word was barely sound. More air than voice. But it was real. He stood frozen in his study, staring at the screen. His daughter's lips trembled, as if shocked by her own voice. The maid froze too. Her eyes widened. Her hand flew to her mouth. The child looked at her. Not at the door. Not at the cameras. At her. The maid knelt instantly. Her voice shaking but steady. You did it. You spoke. The child's mouth curved slightly. A ghost of a smile. The mafia boss dropped into his chair. His chest ached with pride and pain tangled together. That night he could not stay hidden. He went to the hallway outside his daughter's room. He did not enter, but he stood close enough to hear. The maid was telling a story. Not a fairy tale. Not something magical. A story about a small bird with an injured wing. A bird who could not sing, but still learned to fly. The mafia boss pressed his palm to the wall. His jaw clenched. This was what his daughter needed. Presence. Patience. Love without fear. And it was not coming from him. The next morning he tested her. He asked the cook about the meal prepared the night before. Pasta with breadcrumbs and anchovies. It tasted like the past. Like memory. The cook shrugged and said the maid had helped. Said she had adjusted the seasoning without being asked. Later he crossed paths with her in the corridor. You cook Italian food, he said. She nodded. I learned from people who cared about me. Which people? She met his eyes calmly. Good people. He asked about her background. Her training. Her years before this house. She answered politely. Briefly. Never lying. Never revealing. The distance between them sharpened. That afternoon, the doctors reported improved response to treatment. They called it encouraging. Unusual. Promising. The mafia boss knew better. This was not medicine alone. This was connection. That night he watched the maid brush his daughter's hair. Slow, gentle strokes. He saw the child lean into the touch. Saw trust written across her small, tired face. The maid whispered something. The child whispered back. A full word this time. Mama. The mafia boss stood so fast his vision blurred. The words struck like a knife. Like longing. Like grief. His daughter had not called him Papa again. But she had called the maid Mama. He turned away from the monitors. Hands shaking. Breath uneven. This was no longer surveillance. This was torture. For the first time since installing the cameras. He questioned why he needed them at all. And for the first time since his wife died. He wondered if distance had become his greatest enemy. The danger did not arrive with noise. It arrived with patterns. The maid noticed first. She always did. A car parked across the street too often. Always at different hours. Always gone before guards approached. A delivery that arrived early. Then late. Then early again. Never on the same schedule. A man near the gate who asked too many questions. Not the kind that sounded curious. The kind that sounded practiced. The maid said nothing at first. She watched. She counted. She remembered. Downstairs, the mafia boss reviewed reports. His men told him everything was normal. No threats. No unusual movement. But his daughter slept lightly again. Her fingers clenched at night. Her voice faded back into whispers. The maid felt the change in the air. Fear did not shout. It pressed. One evening, as she cleaned the corridor, she paused and looked toward the window. The same silver car was there again. She went to the house manager, spoke quietly, told him what she had seen. He thanked her politely, said security would handle it. They did not. That night, the maid did something dangerous. She wrote everything down. Times, descriptions, details. She slipped the paper into her pocket. Later, the mafia boss appeared in the hallway, watching her without pretending this time. "You look worried," he said. She met his gaze. "Yes." "Why?" "Because someone is watching this house, and not with good intentions." He stiffened. "My security team sees everything." "No," she said. "They see what they expect, not what hides." She told him about the car, the man, the patterns. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When she finished, he was silent. "You should not be noticing these things," he said. She answered simply, "I survived by noticing them." That was when he understood. This woman was not fragile. She was not accidental. She had lived inside danger before. The next morning, his men confirmed it. The car belonged to a shell company. The man near the gate was not local. A rival name surfaced quietly. The mafia boss felt the shift immediately. This was no longer about him. It was about his daughter. He doubled the guards, changed routes, locked the house down. Then he made a decision. He called the maid to his study. "You will stay here full-time," he said. "Day and night." She hesitated. "That changes things." "Yes," he said. "It does." "Why?" "Because my daughter needs you. And because someone now knows you matter to her." Her breath caught. "So I am a weakness." "No," he said. "You are protection." She looked away. "Attachment is dangerous. So is isolation," he replied. He offered her a room closer to the child, offered safety, offered money. She did not answer immediately. That night, the daughter reached for her again, held her hand, and would not let go. The maid sat beside the bed, watching the small rise and fall of her chest. She knew what staying meant. She also knew what leaving would do. Downstairs, the mafia boss watched from the monitors. For the first time, not as a man in control, but as a father afraid. The line had been crossed, not by choice, but by love. And from that moment on, the maid was no longer invisible. She was the center of the storm. The truth did not arrive gently. It arrived like a blade drawn slowly, so the pain lasted longer. The mafia boss received the report just after midnight. He stood alone in his study, the glow of the monitors painting his face in harsh light. The words on the page did not blur. He read them clearly. Too clearly. Forged documents, unregistered certifications, training that existed without official origin. The maid had not lied about what she could do. She had lied about how she was allowed to do it. His hands tightened around the paper. Anger rose sharp and immediate. Not because he felt betrayed, but because betrayal meant danger. And danger meant his daughter. He turned toward the monitor instinctively. His daughter slept curled on her side. The maid sat beside the bed reading softly, one hand resting lightly on the blanket. She looked peaceful, unaware that the ground beneath her was about to collapse. He left the study without calling for guards, without warning anyone. Fear drove him faster than reason. When he opened the door to the child's room, the maid looked up instantly. She knew something was wrong. She always did. "You need to leave the room," he said. His voice was cold, controlled, dangerous. The child stirred. Her hand tightened around the maid's sleeve. "No," the maid said quietly. "She is resting." Now he repeated. The maid hesitated only a second. then gently eased her arm free. She whispered reassurance to the child and stepped into the hallway. He closed the door behind them. "How long did you think you could hide it?" he asked. The papers shook slightly in his hand, despite his control. "Hide what?" she asked, her face pale but steady. "Your credentials. Your training. Everything that allowed you into my house." Silence stretched tight between them. "I can explain," she said. "Explain how you lied to get near my daughter. Explain who sent you. Explain why my enemies are watching this house." "No one sent me," she replied. "I came on my own." "That is not an answer." Before she could speak, a sound cut through the hall. A sharp electronic alarm. High and urgent. They both froze. The child screamed. Not fear. Pain. The maid moved instantly. She ran past him without asking permission. Burst into the room. The child was convulsing. Her body rigid. Her eyes unfocused. Foam at her lips. The mafia boss followed, frozen in horror. The maid took control. She rolled the child carefully. Cleared her air. Her voice sharp and calm. "Get the emergency kit now." "What are you doing?" he shouted. "Saving her life," she said. "Trust me or get out of the way." She injected the medication with practiced precision. Counted seconds aloud. Monitored breathing. The seizure slowed. Then stopped. The room fell silent except for the machines. The mafia boss dropped to his knees. Hands shaking. Breath broken. She saved her. Again. The medical team arrived moments later. As they worked, one of them looked at the maid with surprise. "You have extensive training." The maid said nothing. When they finally stabilized the child, the mafia boss turned to her. His anger shattered into something raw and terrifying. "Who are you?" he demanded. The maid closed her eyes. The secret she had protected for years pressed against her chest. "I was 12 years old," she said softly, "and dying in an alley in Naples." His breath caught. "A woman found me. She carried me. She paid for my treatment. She visited me every month. She taught me songs and prayers and how to care for the sick." She opened her eyes, tears finally falling. Her name was Giuliana. The world tilted. "Your wife saved my life. She trained me. She protected me. And when she died, I came here. Not for you. For your daughter." Silence swallowed the room. The mafia boss stared at her, the truth crashing into him with brutal force. The lie was exposed. But so was something far more dangerous. Love. And the cost of it. The confession did not end the fear. It sharpened it. The mafia boss sat motionless in the hospital waiting room. Hands clasped so tightly, his knuckles had gone white. The maid sat across from him. Eyes red. Back straight. Between them hung a truth that rewrote everything. "Your wife knew what your name meant," the maid continued quietly. "She knew the danger around you. That is why she kept her work separate. Why she never told you about me." He closed his eyes. Images of Giuliana flooded back. The trips to Naples. The unexplained donations. The way she returned lighter, calmer. "She was protecting us both," he whispered. "Yes. She saved me when no one else would. Gave me an education. Gave me skills. Taught me that survival was not enough. That you had to give back." The mafia boss swallowed hard. "And when she became sick," the maid lowered her gaze. "She stopped visiting. But she wrote. Left instructions with the nuns. If anything happened to her, they were to protect her family. From enemies. From exposure. From her own past. From me," he said. "From anyone who might use children as leverage." Silence pressed around them, broken only by distant hospital sounds. When the doctor finally emerged, the child was stable. Asleep. Alive. The mafia boss let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. Later that night back at the mansion, the maid packed her belongings. 2 small bags. Everything she owned. She moved quietly, efficiently, as if she had always expected this moment. The mafia boss watched from the door. "Do not go," he said. "I have to," she replied. "Your daughter is safe. The truth is out. Staying will only make things worse." "For whom?" "For her. For you. For me." He stepped closer. "This house is not safer without you. It is not safer with me either. Your enemies see me now. I am Leverett." The child appeared in the hallway, her face pale, her voice shaking. "You are leaving." The maid knelt immediately. "I promised to stay until you were better." "I am better," the child whispered. "That means you have to go." Tears spilled down her cheeks. The maid pulled her into an embrace. "I came to help you live, not to replace your mother. But you are like her," the child cried. "You sing her songs. You touch my forehead the same way." The mafia boss turned away, pain tearing through him. The maid held the child until the sobs eased. Then she stood. "I will always be grateful to her. But gratitude cannot build a future." She moved toward the door. That was when the alarms sounded again. Not medical. Security. The house locked down instantly. Guards shouting. Footsteps running. A voice crackled over the intercom. "Intrusion detected." The mafia boss moved fast. He pulled the maid back inside. "Stay where I can protect you." "No," she said. "They are here because of me." "They are here because of me," he corrected. The truth settled heavily between them. Giuliana had known, had seen this moment coming, had still chosen kindness. Later in the chaos, as plans were made and threats neutralized, the mafia boss stood in his study alone. He stared at the dark monitors, then reached out and shut them off, one by one. When he returned upstairs, he found the maid sitting beside the child, singing softly. No cameras, no distance, just presence. And for the first time, he did not watch. He joined. Morning arrived without permission. Sunlight crept through the tall windows of the mansion, touching corners that had not known warmth in years. The house was quieter now. Not empty, but watchful in a different way. The cameras were dark. The mafia boss stood in the study staring at the blank screens. For the first time since installing them, he felt exposed and relieved. He had spent the night in his daughter's room, not standing in the doorway, not watching from a distance, but sitting beside her bed. She slept deeply for the first time in weeks, her breathing steady, her face peaceful. The maid sat in the chair nearby. Exhaustion etched into her features. But she did not leave. At dawn, the child opened her eyes and spoke. "Papa." The word was clear. Not a whisper. Not borrowed courage. Her own. The mafia boss broke. He took her hand carefully, as if afraid she might vanish. "I am here," he said. "I am not leaving." She nodded as if she had known all along. Later, the doctors arrived. They spoke in careful, hopeful tones. The treatment was working. The crisis had passed. The road was still long, but no longer hopeless. Hope no longer felt like a threat. In the hallway, the mafia boss stopped the maid. "You were right," he said quietly. "About the patterns. About the danger." She met his eyes. "You listened when it mattered." "That is something I have not done well," he admitted. He told her what he had done overnight. How he dismantled the surveillance grid inside the house. How the guards were repositioned outward. How presence replaced observation. "I will not raise my daughter from behind glass again," he said. The maid breathed out slowly. A weight she had carried without naming finally lifted. But danger had not vanished. By midday, reports arrived. Rivals had tested the perimeter, probed routes, looked for weakness. This time they found none. The mafia boss did not respond with rage. He responded with precision. Orders were given. Quiet. Final. By evening, the threat dissolved. Not with spectacle, but with certainty. That night the house felt different. The child sat up in bed coloring. The maid beside her, laughing softly. The mafia boss stood in the doorway, uncertain. The child saw him first. "Papa, come sit." He hesitated, then obeyed. The maid made space without comment. The child took both their hands, holding them together. "You both stay," she said. The maid felt her chest tighten. The mafia boss swallowed. "This house has been full of fear," he said. "I do not want it to be any more." He looked at the maid, not as an employer, not as a protector, but as a man standing at the edge of chain. "I have ruled through distance my whole life. I thought control was safety." She answered gently. "Sometimes safety is staying." The child leaned against them, eyes heavy. "I want both of you," she murmured. That night, as the child slept between them, the mafia boss understood something irreversible. Power had never been the enemy. Fear was. And the woman he once suspected, once watched through hidden eyes, had taught him how to see without them. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and steady. "Do not leave." She closed her eyes, then nodded. "Not tonight," she said. "Not ever," he replied. The house learned how to breathe again. It did not happen all at once. It happened in small moments, in quiet mornings, in evenings without tension. The child grew stronger each day, not just in body, but in spirit. She laughed more. She spoke without fear. She slept without waking in pain. The maid no longer sat at the edge of the room. She sat beside the child, sometimes beside the man as well. The mafia boss changed in ways no one expected. He stopped standing behind doors, stopped listening from hallways, stopped watching from shadows. He stayed. He attended medical visits, held his daughter's hand, learned how to sit through discomfort instead of escaping it. One afternoon, the doctors delivered news that felt unreal. The treatment was working beyond expectations. The illness was retreating. The word remission was spoken softly at first, then repeated with confidence. The child cried. The maid cried. The mafia boss closed his eyes and let the tears come. That night, the three of them sat together in the living room. No guards nearby. No cameras watching. Just presence. The maid prepared dinner. Simple food. Comforting. The kind that felt like memory. The child ate without being asked. Then looked up suddenly. "You stay now," she said. "Forever." The maid hesitated. Old instincts pulling at her chest. Fear of belonging. Fear of loss. The mafia boss stood. He walked toward her slowly. Not commanding. Not controlling. "I hid behind walls," he said. "Behind power. Behind machines. Because I was afraid to lose." He knelt in front of her. In front of the child. "I will not hide anymore." The child watched with wide eyes, understanding more than anyone expected. The mafia boss reached into his pocket. Not with urgency, but with certainty. He opened his hand. The ring caught the light. Simple. Strong. Real. "I do not ask because you saved my daughter," he said. "I ask because you saved me." The maid covered her mouth. Her knees weakened. The child gasped. "Is that a yes thing?" The mafia boss smiled. A real smile. For the first time in years. The maid looked at the child. Then at the man. Then at the home that had once been filled with fear. Yes, she whispered. The child screamed with joy, jumped into their arms, laughing, crying. The house heard it. The walls remembered it. Later that night, the cameras were removed completely. Wires pulled. Screens dark. The study became just a room, not a control center. Weeks passed. Then months. The child returned to school. Her voice strong. Her eyes bright. The maid became family. Not through paperwork, but through love. The mafia boss learned a new kind of power. The kind that comes from presence. From choosing people over fear. One evening, they stood in the garden. The sky filled with stars. The maid sang softly. The old song. The one that began everything. The child joined in. Her voice clear. Confident. The mafia boss listened. Not from a distance, but beside them. He understood then. The cameras were never the problem.